Namaste, Assalamu alaikum, Shalom, Ni hao, Buenos dias, Buenos tardes, Hesiche, Aquaba, welcome in. What up, dope? This is Cafe Melange, week numero 10, session numero uno. And the topic today, it's not, it's lightweight heavy. It's involved. It requires notes, but it may be comparatively brief if I can maintain my breath without hiccups for an extended period. So this is actually a jambalaya of ideas from recent conversations, recent studies, and additionally, and yeah, it requires me putting it into sequence to have some linearity for it to be increasingly receptive or receivable. But here it is. A number of months ago, many weeks ago, either in this joint or in another joint, I referenced the notion of, I share the notion of mélanger hospitality, what that is, what that looks like, how that feels, how we give it, how we share it, how we receive it. And the consideration is that in the experience of being mélanger, we are accustomed to acclimating to whatever the environment is that we find ourselves in, whether it's visiting another relative or a friend's house or university or school or community or house of worship, whatever. We find ourselves within set protocols, and so we abide by those protocols. That's the general rule and practice experience. And so we gain actually very valuable insight and it's not acumen, it's knowledge. We get a fine knowledge of what those protocols are, how to conduct oneself, and that is increasingly lucrative when we look into relationships, building negotiations and cooperation with different communities. Having a knowledge about what the protocols are, what the principles are, what the etiquette is, and additionally, that's valuable, particularly at a younger age, or when we learn at a younger age. So, anyways, that's what we are as military. But then the question becomes, as we become adults, how do we practice our hospitality? How do we provide hospitality for people who visit us? And we grow up in different. Haha. Oh, that's a text. So we grow up in different situations. Some of us grow up in monoethnic houses where there's a certain amount of assimilation within the mainstream. Some of us grow in very ethnic specific houses where it's different from the mainstream, but it's according to one family member's background. And some of us grow up in like a hodgepodge. I'm reminded of the fictional character, this children's book series, Amy Hodgepodge. Anyways, we grow up like in a mixture of cultures and customs within our own house. But at some point, as adults, when we become stewards of our own domiciles, respectively, even collectively, we have to make decisions about, okay, do we take the footwear off? Do we wear headgear when we're inside? Do we lay it all out, or is it a serve yourself kind of situation? So all the different customs that we grew up with, that we're familiar with, that we're even very intimate with, we have to make a decision about, okay, how are we going to do things where we stay? So that was an issue actually when we began the discussion group of like what the protocols are additionally. So and that applies not just to hospitality, but even just organizations, groups, family, how we raise children, the principles we convey, and additionally, how are we gonna practice who we are, what we are. And so obviously there are different ways of doing that. Now, One of the challenges that I experience personally is that to be a host, there needs to be a certain sense of belonging, a certain sense of ownership and authority. And for me, there's difficulty in doing that because this is a settler society, so everything is stolen. And so part of my approach and my practice of being Melange is being righteous. And so because the principles that are shared, it's a matter of abiding by the principles within each community and recognizing that each of the communities has less vested interest in being in pledging allegiance to us as Melange because of the consideration of the perception of inauthenticity or lack of purity. And so, as a way of establishing certain trust and proficiency with other communities, it's a matter of being very dedicated and thorough in practicing the principles. Because if it's not the blood quantum allegiance, then it has to be a matter of practice. So, and if it's a matter of allegiance with multiple communities, it's a matter of abiding by all the rules of those communities, which is increasingly stringent and austere. But it's possible, it's plausible, it's even applaudable. So, anyways, that's what I do. Now, if I do that, if I'm being genuinely righteous and honest and forthright, that means recognizing the atrocities that are being done, that have been done, that are being done on this land, and that includes to Native people and everything being stolen. So, How can I genuinely like play the host role and provide hospitality when it ain't even the land, the deed titles issuer's land. So that's like a fundamental premise. So now we do work with that with our UNI village. We've established an understanding with the native brethren about having um, temporary permission or authorization or acceptance for us being here. So that's a different story, but that's what we've done now. Simultaneously, this domicile that I'm in at this moment, it's actually government managed. It's public housing, and so it's basically, well, I don't feel getting into all that at the moment, but the point is there are a lot of conditions, and even in the domicile where I exist at this moment, that make it difficult to genuinely say, "Oh, welcome, hey," because guess what? Just a few months ago, I was locked up. A few months ago, I was issued with further threats, and so it's a matter of how can I genuinely welcome somebody into that environment when I know I myself am being at risk to that. Now I know how to handle myself. I know how to deal with it, and I abide and living by those rules and principles is a very effective way in dealing with that, and negating those threats and those hostilities. But not everybody does that, and so if I invite people to be here, it's difficult to say, well, here's the like this the situation, and I give like a 5 page brief about what the situation is, just because they need to know. So um, that's difficult. And I could pretend to just say, "Oh, you're welcome. Here's some tea, this and the other," and put on the nice front. But um, then when people go out, then they're susceptible to the scrutiny, the stigmatization, and everything that is placed upon myself. So people might say, "Oh, that's paranoia. That's too much. It's too heavy." Yo, that's where things are at this point, and that's what it's been like in my life, my life, my life. So, and I'll go further on that. It's outside the notes, but I was actually thinking about this um, as part of the experience of hell. And it's not bad because there's heaven here too, and there's blessings and all this beauty and joy and light and substance here as well. And so I recognize that, and so I invite people to that accordingly, and I try to communicate the balance of it all collectively. And when people ask, be as forthright and candid as possible. But back to the hell thing, though. A number of years ago, over a decade ago or so, um, I go through hell. I catch hell. I live in hell. I experience hell in many different ways. And one of those experiences is perceiving oneself as a curse. It's one thing to go through life with persecution and admonishment and everything else like that. But one of the hellish experiences of this is when um, is loving somebody else and loving that person so much. that not wanting to avail the person to the same affliction and hostilities that one is experiencing. So it's difficult to explain. I mean, that's it basically right there. But what I'll do is I'll articulate it in other ways to kind of further convey the experience. But um, it's hellish because you can't even love, because when one perceives oneself as a curse, like, oh, I can't even like reach out to that person, because then everybody else is gonna do this that, and the other, what they've been doing to me, to that person, and they're not experiencing it at the moment. They're experiencing joy, light, this and the other, and so I can't even I can't even reach out to love that person, to be in proximity with that person. Can't even like accept that person's reaching out to me, because I don't want that person to be availed to what I'm going through. That's hellish. Perceiving oneself as a curse, literally. So not even going out to like to talk to people, not wanting to afflict, perceiving oneself as a contagion, and not wanting to expose others to that experience of hell. Now, I experienced that a number of years ago. I continue to experience that. However, what I also experience is the heaven and the blessings that exist beyond the experience of hell. And I do my best to convey the discipline that's involved to experience the heaven, and not even just the balance, but the transcendence. So, what I've recognized, and I continue to cultivate patience in understanding and perceiving and recognizing, is that that guidance, that lesson, that teaching of balance and transcendence exists beyond words, and it's just a matter of how we live, and people observing it accordingly, and absorbing it accordingly. Um, so that's one of the things I learned. Now, all that being said, still have a challenge with the hospitality. I welcome people, do my best, do my best to make it neat and tidy. It ain't always that way. Like right now, there's a lot of things going on, but I won't go into detail. But there are conditions that make it rather difficult to like be comfortable in inviting people. So, anyways, that's part of the experience with me personally offering mélanger hospitality, um, in the full gamut of what it is and what it can be, from the full service hospitality to the self service hospitality, and additionally. So, anyways, that being said, um, also I'll say that what I've also recognized is that everybody experiences this in one way or another, to certain degrees. A certain notion of imposition upon others, even in receiving others, which is one reason why we can understand why hospitality is so important, why guests are such a blessing, and to be readily attentive when we are blessed with guests. Um, and also, uh, in terms of like the notion of ownership and authority, there's the consideration. There's the consideration. There's the consideration that particularly all religions have an experience of foreignness. Um, from the tradition of Israel, Christianity, Islam, even Desi traditions, Hinduism, Buddhism, um, Jainism, Sikhism, Baha'i, and additionally have a certain experience of being a foreigner, and residing upon foreign land in a foreign situation. And when offering hospitality, it being done um, in such contexts, in such conditions. So I talk about that a number of years ago with some native brethren. Um, and yes, there is certain criticism about that experience, about the imperialistic tendencies, the imposition, and additionally, but there's also a certain amount of awakening, understanding, um, transcendence, balance, insight, um, that is involved as well. So, anyways, I share that as a way of recognizing a larger context beyond just the melange experience of feeling out of place, that the vast many traditions of humanity have that experience as well, and find ways of being increasingly um, belonging, for lack of better grammatical phraseology. And so there's a consideration for Melange brethren to be similarly encouraged in finding that balance and that belonging. And again, one of the big ways of doing that is righteousness. And where there's a situation where Melange brethren are not indigenous or are strainly indigenous. Oh, excuse me. One of the ways that religions facilitate continued stewardship, occupation, imperialization, and the like, settlership, and additionally, is one, obviously, weaponry, tools, and additionally, but also it's a methodology. It's not just a matter of being increasingly efficient or productive. It's a matter of being able to do something or practicing even a principle and an ethic in such a way that native brethren have yet to uh, employ, and thus maintain a certain amount of political, even ethical or philosophical um, leverage or capital or sway or influence that continues the presence of the settler until native brethren are able to find a way of superseding or rendering such uh, differences obsolete. So, anyways, that's a consideration with that. So for Mélanger brethren, it's a matter of um, again cultivating those principles, cultivating the ethics, and practicing the ethics as a way of substantiating and strengthening the sense of belonging, sense of stewardship, and authority where we live. Um, so I talked with a brother earlier today on a number of topics, one of which includes the black community, people of African ancestry, and people that say, "Here I go again, what about that?" It's part of the joint, yo. And one of the after just even less than an hour after having a conversation, what occurs to me is just like as a focal point. Um, we talk about literacy, the need for literacy. In previous conversations with additional brethren, we talk about health, we talk about politics, we talk about money, we talk about economics as priority needs. We talk about people. A lot of people like to talk about the jail system, criminal system, and the political imprisonment tendencies of criminal law. So all of those are issues. Here's what I'm able to identify as like the quintessential, even nothing near close. Seriously, nothing near close. Not even education or employment or economics. Not close. As a priority issue for black folk, for people of African ancestry on this land, for Nubians, for descendants of the Middle Passage. It is this issue: residential cooperatives. Plain and simple, full stop, period. Residential cooperatives. The consideration with that is living literally as physical communities, and remembering, recultivating that experience of what it's like to be a community, a physical community, a village, make decisions together, handle the infrastructure, plumbing, electricity, utilities, uh, internet, phone, this and the other. Know what it's like, know how to answer those issues, and everything else: education, literacy, employment, all that falls along those lines. Because when a group is living as a community and learns how to make decisions together collectively, that's strength. And now there's increasing autonomy, having school cooperatives, economic cooperatives, and through those providing literacy, and providing employment, providing a sense of self and a sense of value, a sense of worth that strengthens people's negotiation leverage and balance when talking with other communities and other groups. Residential cooperatives, letting go of the single family house concept, and building collectively, pooling the resources. You ain't got to have lots of money. You're already paying rent. You're already doing this debt on the house or whatever else it is. Whatever else it is, put it together. Get a CDC together. Get subsidization. Don't even need subsidization. You can get investment from domestic entities, from international entities. And that's another thing about like the U.S. government. How much of it is an obstruction, and how much of it is actually a service? Our government is supposed to be a service. And yes, there are roads and utilities. There's the money, but we can look at what government does in an obstructive way in terms of immigration, both people arriving here and people leaving here. We can look at trade infringements in terms of tariffs, blocks, and additionally, we can talk about taxation. Um, we can talk about policing and violence against citizens and civilians. So, as much as a service as particularly the United States is providing in terms of facilitation of trade of products, and additionally, the U.S. is becoming increasingly obstructive of these things, particularly in the advent of the internet and the increasing amount of autonomy in making transactions independently. And that's also independent from big businesses. And that's one of the reasons why we can see we that's and we can see that's one of the reasons why the U.S. is becoming increasingly obstructive, because it's abiding by the interests of large commercial institutions. So all that being said, um, history shows us, God tells us, when these obstructions accumulate, as it is within recent experience, years, generations, things change in fundamental ways. So, anyways, my point is not to get revolutionary on that joint, but it's a matter of recognizing the obstructions are becoming excessive compared to the services. And so there is expectation there we can expect the universe and ourselves to facilitate adjustments accordingly. And residential cooperatives provide people an increasing amount of practical knowledge of how to administer a community and deal with other communities effectively. And that's not a precursor for revolution. It's not a matter of residential cooperatives being the next revolution or whatever. Like I already said, the revolution is already co-opted. America is revolution incorporated. And so it's the corporations that are facilitating the revolution. The consideration is that the residential cooperatives provide civilians with an increased amount of um, um, authority and responsibility to be able to deal with each other effectively and comfortably without fear mongering and additionally. So residential cooperatives. Number one issue for black folk, but that applies to all folk, including melange, European, Asian, African, Mediterranean, Latino, Native, residential cooperatives all around. You get a residential cooperative, you get a residential cooperative, you get a residential cooperative. Um, so that's further consideration. Again, continuing along the lines of that hospitality joint. Now, as we continue further, we talk about this notion of independence, autonomy, responsibility, authority, and additionally, here's another consideration. This comes from actually the weekly consideration with Asana Ashram. Big up Asana Ashram. We have to work on that too. It's been a while since I do that. Oh wow, we're late. Hey, I gotta hurry this up. All right, so we're talking about authority. We're talking about power of the mind. So here's a further consideration. I was talking with somebody yesterday about a young brother about the powers that be and how we are the powers that be. And here's something to consider. For people who are perceived as and are self-perceived as minorities, leveraged, oppressed, marginalized, silenced, and additionally, here's consideration to understand how extremely important each individual is. It's a matter of this understanding the power of the mind. Understanding the power of the mind. It is awesome. It is beyond imagination, literally. And when we like begin to understand the power of the mind and like further understand the power of the mind, seriously, how things are manifest just through conceptualization, it's scary. And part of the reasons why it's scary is because a lot of people are so undisciplined, can't control the mind. Like Cyclops from the X-Men, just zapping everything up with the eyesight. That's what people are with people's minds and ideas. So people get scared of that and try to numb it with intoxicants, with sex, with oppression, violence, and additionally, people try to numb the mind because they're scared of their thoughts. Because they might think about something and oh, the next second that happens, or if they get mad at somebody and they just think oh I wish da da da, and then all of a sudden it happens, or maybe the next day they find out it happens. I didn't seriously want that. I was just scary. So there are certain methodologies that people utilize again to like numb down or dumb down the mind. I mentioned a number of those: sex, drugs, rock and roll, and additionally, meditation, prayer, davening, samadhi, yoga. There are healthy ways of doing it as well. Exercise. But the thing is, what I found is that a lot of people find um, find a predatory way of dealing with dumbing the mind or numbing the mind, and it's this: getting in a room together and being with somebody who's considered an imbecile, innocent, but and stupid, maybe um, mentally challenged, maybe a child, and additionally. And I find that people tend to be intellectually predatory or cognitively predatory, meaning that they just dump on that person and they find the focal point. So everybody's concentration is on the weak one in the room. And so whenever like a negative thought, they just direct it towards that individual. And it's not a matter of being directly violent towards the individual. They might feed the individual or treat the individual nice or whatever else, but just direct the negative thoughts of like, oh, that person will bear the burden. And so like I said, it can be a child, and the thing is, the person has to be certain innocent and not genuinely not have malice towards other people in the room, because their person, in dumping on that person, they're also conferring that person with power, and they're trusting that person to be docile. So like I said, it's somebody who is mentally, I don't want to say incapacitated or whatever, but has certain mental challenges. A child, but also another one are slaves, and particularly slaves that are very recognizable, very discernible, very separational, very separable, like black folk. And additionally, and so it's a matter of dealing with the black folk accordingly, and then uh, in the room, just that person is the recipient of the negative thoughts, and it may manifest itself in many cases actually in verbal abuse of just pipe down or be quiet, who told you to speak, and just kind of like derogatory treatment accordingly. Don't get too big for your britches, that type of talk. And it can get into physical things of like, oh, that person better now, boom, and physical punishment, training, retraining, education, and additionally. So it's a thing. Now, that being said, in the experience of Mélanger, there's a consideration that in experiencing certain leveraging and marginalization, and additionally, that Mélanger people are often also in that experience of the burden bearer in many situations amongst people who are in the mainstream, and thus being the one who's different, and then being in the experience of the people who are the afflicted, and then being the middle one, and so being perceived as again the outsider again. So anyways, the consideration is this: recognizing the power of the mind, the power of our mind, even when we're being put upon and burden bearers, and additionally, recognizing the power that exists within our mind. And particularly when we are the target of that abuse, and in recognizing the power of the mind, rather than being angry, rather than being hostile, and just stewing in our own hatred, and just imagining what we want to do to other people, because that's what hurts ourselves. Rather than doing that, finding healthy ways of cultivating that power and harnessing that power. Again, yoga, tai chi, samadhi, davening, salat, prayer, meditation, walking meditation, sitting meditation, um, exercise, healthy diet, eating plants. But when we manifest, when we discipline ourselves, when we discipline our actions, when we discipline our communication, and when we discipline our thoughts, we are cultivating that power. We are harnessing that power. We are sharing that power. And it's not a matter of being powerful. It's not a matter of being ego. It's a matter of being harmonious. Um, and when we do that, recognize how valuable we are, because um, there's power of the mind, there's peace of mind, and then there's the price of the mind. So when we find ourselves in those situations where we are called upon to be the peace, to provide other people with that peace of mind, because that's valuable. That's extremely valuable. If people are relying upon somebody to be the recipient of the burdens, in order to abstain from being done up themselves, and by done up I mean being killed, being tortured, being raped, being pillaged, or whatever else, once people, the mind runs rampant. The mind runs rampant, particularly when cats are grimy and doing dirt, and in proximity with cats who are doing dirt. It's rampant. It's very difficult to control. So when people rely upon somebody else to be that balancer, that's a heavy service. And so when we find ourselves doing that, it's a matter of recognizing an appropriate price to charge for that service. So rather than just being placated by, oh, here's some crumbs, there you go, now go off someplace. So excuse me, no, not interested in those crumbs. Thank you very much. Oh, now it becomes a negotiation. We have to become careful, because if we get too haughty and too egotistical, that's undoing. So it's a matter of recognizing, again, what's fair, um, and not settling for anything less than what's fair for everybody's sake. That's the price. The power of the mind, the peace of the mind, and the price of the mind. Fairness. Um, Now, when we talk about mélanger, there's a consideration of what our characteristics are. I mean, there are certain stereotypes about different ethnic groups, different ethnic communities being intellectual, being physical, having physical prowess, being mathematically inclined, being creative, this, that, and the other. Um, and again, stereotypes are broad generalizations, and so thus there's a lot of inaccuracy and untruth to it. But then there's also a certain element of truth to it as well. And we can look at history and things where things are invented, where things are cultivated, and additionally, and the cultures, the schools that build from that, and who's attended those schools, and who continues to attend those schools. And so we can look at that. So when it comes to mélanger, we can think of what's our trait, what's our thing, what's our shtick. And so there are a number of things that we can look at, we have proclivities for all types of occupations and endeavors, but there are certain things that we have a certain penchant for, and that includes harmony, diplomacy, pluralism, and negotiation between groups. And so there's a consideration of accepting that, owning that, cultivating that, sharing that accordingly, in a fair way, where we are supported, sustained, and prosperous through providing that service. Um, That's mélanger. And it's important, it's appropriate for us to recognize how important that is, how needed that is, how valuable it is, in ways that the rest of the earth knows, and in ways that the rest of the earth has yet to know. And again, cultivating discipline within ourselves so we have a better idea of what fair is, so that we are supported fairly in the services that we provide. So I speak frequently, repeatedly in this joint about discipline, meaning principles, routines. I also speak in previous joints about our ancestors and rituals, particularly referencing teachings from Confucius. And along those lines, I'll share this. Um, these are the two concluding things in terms of mélanger rituals and mélanger ethos. Excuse me. Mélanger rituals. There are um, eight rituals that are constructed or being constructed, um, to be observed throughout the year, throughout each year, uh, in our mélanger experience. These rituals come from a perspective of being mixed, of mixed heritage, but also that mix including a specific ethnic heritage or traditional heritage. So it's both of those experiences, both being mixed and both being of that ancestry or that ethnic or traditional heritage. Um, and the purpose of it is to honor our ancestors, honor our traditions, honor our forebears, um, honor the principles and the teachings that are conveyed through our respective and collective heritages, um, and also strengthen our mélanger experience and mélanger identity. Um, and so part of the approach I share in being mélanger is having a genuine appreciation and support for both mono-ethnic uh, heritage, um, Asian, European, African, Mediterranean, um, Native, Latino, and additionally having genuine respect and appreciation and support for each of these different heritages, but then also having genuine respect, appreciation, and support for our mélanger experience. Whether it's biracial, biethnic, multi-ethnic, and additionally doing that. So, what I'll share this moment is the sequence of these rituals, when what they are and when they occur. So I'll go through the year, through the course of 1 year. Um, some of these have already been going on for a number of years at this point. Some have yet to be done in earnest as of yet. But I'm just going to give the whole list, um, and then after I've already given the introduction, I'll let it speak for itself. So here we go. It begins the year utilizing the Holy Earth calendar, which actually begins on the Gregorian calendar in the month of September, on the 11th of September, commemorating the Parliament of the World's Religions, 126 years ago, 126 years ago. So the year begins, the Holy Earth year, the Holy Earth calendar year, begins on that day. And it is on that day that begins a period of honoring our ancestors, affirming our ancestors. That's actually the ritual. And there's a liturgy of affirming our ancestors, specifically for mélanger people of all different types. And it's specifically, and I don't want to say exclusively, but it's concentratedly a mélanger, all mélanger ritual. People of all different types of ethnic backgrounds, and additionally, that's who it's for. And again, it's affirming our ancestors. That begins the year. So then the next observance after that, the next ritual, in a general year, in a general calendar year. The next observance is, I think it is winter's honors. So actually, I'm gonna okay, I'll continue with that. Winter's Honors. So, Winter's Honors is a ritual that is convened on Sancta Lucia, which is a Scandinavian holiday observance with Italiano roots, and additionally, but basically, it celebrates light during the darkness of winter. And so there is a ritual of pan-European reconciliation that comes from our Melange experience, and it's called Winter's Honors. And there's a poem that yours truly pens in conjoinment with that ritual. So that's the pan-European ritual, pan-European Melange ritual. Then after that, and sometimes it can be before that, depending on how the calendars align, it is the Shachrit Bechol Lashon. It's davening, the AM service in the tradition of Israel, in all tongues, in all languages. So basically, this is a pan-Israeli ritual, and it's convened during the period of Hanukkah within Israeli tradition. And again, it's a matter of reconciliation for mixed people, Melange people, who are of Israeli ancestry as well. So that's the basic gist of it. Again, it can occur before Sancta Lucia on certain years, and I think it also can occur after Sancta Lucia on certain years. So that's back and forth. Then about a month after that is a Pan-Asian ritual, and I'm just going to continue to refer to it as Pan-Asian ritual at the moment. But again, the theme of it is reconciliation. And by Pan-Asian, I'm including China, Japan, Korea, Southeast Asia, including Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, Thailand, Indonesia, India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Nepal, Bhutan, Myanmar, all that, Singapore, all that. So Pan-Asian reconciliation. That's the theme of it. That's the purpose of it. There's a poem that's constructed for that purpose, and it is convened on a full moon before the Chinese New Year. We can call it the Lunar New Year, however we want to call it. That's when the ritual of the Pan-Asian reconciliation ceremony and ritual is convened. The full moon before the Lunar New Year. And again, this is also each of these are again Melange specific, but also aligned with the with important dates and significant dates within and observances within the respective ethnic and traditional calendars to cultivate and strengthen that mindfulness and that cohesion, that relationship. So there's that. That was numero tres. Numero cuatro is Pan-Iberian ritual. That includes a poem, and it includes a theme of reconciliation, and it is convened within the period following the full moon before Carnival. So again, it's a matter of right before Carnival, having this ritual of Pan-Iberian reconciliation, and cultivating mindfulness for the approaching season of Lent that precedes the Holy Week, and concluding with Easter within Christian tradition and within Pan-Iberian tradition. So there's that. That was numero cuatro. Numero cinco is Inamaka Powwow. So Inamaka Powwow is a pan-native ritual, and it's actually there is a ritual. It includes a poem. Actually, it includes a liturgy. It can include a poem, but there's a general window for observing this, and the window begins on I think it's the full moon before the northern spring equinox, and it continues until the full moon, I think before the Mid-Autumn Festival. Or maybe actually the Mid-Autumn Festival proper, because that's on a full moon too. But anyways, it's a window throughout the summer of mindfulness for the powwow season amongst native brethren. And it's an Inamaka powwow, which means an earth-wide powwow of pan-native reconciliation, and particularly focusing on native medicine. So that's número cinco. Número seis. Actually, affirming our ancestors, Shachri Becholeshon, Winter's Honors, Pan-Asian Reconciliation, Pan-Iberian Reconciliation. Inamakapawa is actually numero seis. Numero siete is a Pan-African Reconciliation joint, and it's actually the Iwaji Moon Festival. So this occurs during the Iwaji Festival, the New Yam Festival in West Africa, which is the full moon. The period is around the 12th month on the Holy Earth calendar. So it's right before the New Year. And this particular ceremony occurs in the middle of the Iwaji Festival on the full moon day of the festival. And so again, there's a liturgy, particularly focusing on Middle Passage and our ancestors and brethren who experience and emerge from the Middle Passage, and strengthening our relationship with the land of Africa, with the people and culture and language of Africa, amidst the diaspora. So that's the ritual numero siete. Ritual numero ocho occurs on a rotational basis because it is aligned with the Islamic Hijra calendar. And so that, in comparison with both lunar solar and solar calendars, occurs at different points each year. So this particular ritual is a Pan-Arab and Islamic reconciliation ritual, and that's the focus, that's the theme, and it is convened during a period between the full moon preceding Ramadan up to Ramadan. And again, it's a matter of strengthening, cultivating mindfulness of the approach of Ramadan. Just like Iwaji is a matter of commemorating or cultivating the mindfulness of the New Yam Festival in West Africa amongst the participants of the Iwaji Moon Festival ceremony. And that the Inamaka powwow cultivates mindfulness for the powwow season amongst native brethren here on Turtle Island. So those are the ocho rituals. And as you can see, it covers a lot of different ethnic and traditional backgrounds. This is coming from years of practice and study. And so, to be honest, my personal proficiency is varies from tradition to tradition. The level of expertise. But this is a cooperative endeavor, and the insight and contributions and participation of people who are in increased proximity and familiarity with respective traditions is invited and welcome. So that's lange rituals. And again, Confucius talks about how when we have rituals, we rely less upon individual authority for facilitating order within society. The rituals provide us teachings and guidance, assurance, trust, reassurance. So rather than relying upon individuals to provide us with that experience, and then being frustrated for individuals for falling short in our perceptions and expectations, that can be increasingly excessive. Rather than that, it's a matter of practicing the rituals, and through the rituals, getting that reassurance and getting that guidance, getting that sense of connection and relationship, and that insight towards how to engage within this temporal realm, um, and thus have less expectations for others, particularly leaders, and less frustration when those leaders fall short of those expectations. That's the wisdom of rituals. Um, so, anyways, there's that. Now, the other joint is melange ethos. Um, Melange ethos. Again, melange ethos is the notion of principles that are shared by different traditions or different ethnic and religious communities and traditions. Um, there's a thing called wealth ethos that focuses on nonviolence, social justice, appropriate treatment amongst men and women, and then truthfulness. I guess that was actually up there beforehand. But anyways, melange ethos shares that and builds from it further. So there's a ditty I can do that shares one rendering of melange ethos, which is this. Ahimsa Ubuntu Veritas Chaya Shu Mako Huga Samadhi Shema Shibono Nurab. Those are 11. Those are Onse principles. Ahimsa, Ubuntu, Veritas, Chaya, Shu, Maka, Huga, Samadhi, Shema, Shibono, Narab. Each of those words and each of those concepts or terms and each of those principles are come from a different language and a different tradition. Yet each one is shared by the very many traditions and ethnic and cultural communities around the earth, in one way or another, to some degree of prioritization or otherwise. Um, so I'll give the street translation of each of these. Ahimsa, don't starve none, won't be none. Ubuntu, don't starve none, won't be none. Veritas, don't story none, won't be none. Chaya, don't STD none, won't be none. Shu, game recognized game. Maka, green is the land. Huga, blood, cuz. Samadhi, CPT. Shema, hallelujah, amen. Shabono, brother's gonna work it out. Narap, respect. There are also other principles like Nisimanfo, Academia, Sadaji, Gambaro, forgiveness, but rather than getting the details of that at the moment, what I will share is this. The notion is, the suggestion is shared earlier this afternoon, or earlier today, about doing a Melange Ethos Awards annually, basically awarding to a community, and particularly a community or a group, rather than just an individual, because it's too easy to like spotlight individuals who actually rely upon a very large support network that may often be behaving in a contrary manner to how that individual is doing, and intentionally so, just so that the individual can be spotlighted. So rather than just focusing on individuals, focusing on communities and organizations that exemplify one of the principles in Melange ethos. So, for example, to do a rendering of that first joint, ahimsa, don't start, no one will be none. Another way of describing it is just basically nonviolence, abstinence from violence, peacefulness. So the way the Melange ethos awards would work is this, or it does work if we, amongst doing it, is this. For the Melange ethos award of ahimsa, uh, it is bestowed upon XYZ or XYZ community. And so, what the consideration is, what committee or what community shows the strongest example of ahimsa within our Earth experience at this moment. Uh, Now, we can think about this also historically, but the idea is doing this as a yearly thing. But we can look historically all the way up through today. What community on Earth, whether it's an entire ethnic community or racial community, or whether it's a tribal community or a local physical community, or again, organization. What community most highest exemplifies um, the principle of ahimsa? Uh, and the same question goes for each of these principles. So I'll give my rendering, a very quick rendering of it, and I have to think about it further. But it's beneficial to have this conversation and to like invite the idea and actually confer the awards, because that's what awards are often for, just to convey the principle or the organization, promote the organization that's doing it. But here's a thought. Here's what my perception is on each of these awards, from ahimsa through narab. So for the word of ahimsa, what group best exemplifies it? I'm gonna go with Jane, because veganism, traditional for millennia. Um, for we could say the vegan community outright, but the vegan community is still very much enveloped in atrocities against other people, and so this has yet to account for that, and has a lack of discipline that distinguishes itself from other human beings. And so, yes, veganism is important and valuable and beneficial, but being vegan alone abstains from qualifying one as very heightened within the ahimsa game. So go with Jain. And I say Jain rather than Buddhist or Buddhist Tathagata, group of Tathagata or bhikshus, because even the bhikshus these days often eat meat, kill animals, but also are very much enveloped in conventional mainstream endeavors. Jain too, to a certain extent, but um, Buddha, the Sangha, is involved in a certain amount of ambivalent duplicity in terms of holding the religious practitioners, i.e., the monks and nuns, to a certain standard, and that is an austere standard. But then when it comes to the laity, the brethren, it seems like there's a very laissez-faire kind of methodology or approach to that. So, and a lot of that can be attributed to a lot of different reasons, but that's just what the experience is, the observance is. So that's why it goes to Jane. That's long-winded. Let me see if I can do the rest comparatively briefly. Ahimsa, Ubuntu. What nation best or what community best exemplifies Ubuntu? To be honest, I have to think about a number of options, a number of candidates. Um, First of all, just like for Himsa and all the other principles, it seems very difficult not to award, at least particularly in like the historical category, like everything up to now. It seems very difficult to not award the not to bestow the award upon the namesake or the language that provides the concept, because that's part of the intentionality in providing the name. So when it comes to like Ubuntu, it's like how can you do something other than Southern African, other than Zulu, or at least other than African in general. And then also rightfully drawing upon all the different teachings and examples of ahimsa that exist within African, South African, even West African, and additional heritage. So, but that's one thought. But then we think, okay, what about Scandinavia? And look about socialism, or social democracy, or whatever it's called. Look at like everything that's being done for the people on a widespread basis, not just a matter of abstinence from warfare and additionally, but even further proactive in alleviating the violence of poverty and addiction that people experience. So that's a legit consideration. And then we can look to other places as well. But all that being said, I'm just going to say inconclusive for this joint. All how dissatisfactory. Dukkha. So the next one, veritas. Now, to be honest with you, that's a toss-up. It's difficult for me to see any outright community that most exemplifies the principle of veritas, truthfulness, compared to any other community. That's religious, that's ethnic, that's national, whatever. It's difficult for me to see any community doing that at this moment. Um, some things that come to mind are the truth and reconciliation process in South Africa, uh, in I think it was Liberia, and otherwise. But the thing about that is that yes, those are awesome examples. However, in some ways, there's concern about those processes of immunity and additionally to wrongdoers, not necessarily being truthful in terms of the lack of accountability that is bestowed upon the previous war crimes and additional crimes that people commit. Um, it makes it seem like the truth and reconciliation process is like a bartering that kind of just for the sake of social order, given the momentum of mental consciousness within society, rather than necessarily a strict commitment towards the ethos of truthfulness. It seems to be just kind of like a negotiated deal um, that gives incentive for previous transgressors to come clean. So that's one of the challenges with the truth and reconciliation process. So again, for this topic, for the third principle of veritas, it's somewhat of a toss-up. So that's where it stands. Numero cuatro is chaya, which community best exemplifies modesty. So again, as I described before, it's difficult to say any other community other than the Ummah, rather than Arabic culture or Muslim culture, where women dress rather modestly and are known for doing it. Obviously, not all women, but women are known for dressing modestly and not calling attention to physical attributes and beauty of women. That's part of what the essence of Chaya is. But there are other components of it as well. And there's a consideration that even whilst other communities, other cultures may behave in a certain way that's different, may dress in a certain way that's different than what I just described in terms of covering the head and body parts, there are other ways of being modest, particularly modesty in economic wants and demands, and that translating into an increased amount of harmony and peace within the domestic conditions. So Chaya is a comprehensive experience and discipline of modesty. Sexual modesty is a big part of it. However, it's also comprehensive. So uh, that's again, it's a little bit of a up in the air joint, and there's something for discussion for further consideration. Next one, shu, reciprocity, golden rule. Which community is best exemplifying that? It's difficult to say at the moment. I've got a lot of these at the moment. Like I said, it's just recent consideration. Golden rule. Which community best exemplifies golden rule? Is doing unto others as the community would have others do unto itself. Challenge. Is it melange? I don't know. Again, you could say Chinese. That's where the principle comes from. Um, could even say native, but when we're honest about it, like native, even to this day, are very uh, have a strong legacy of being antagonistic, at least to each other, but also towards other groups as well. So it's difficult just to say that. Same thing goes for ahimsa. But anyways, that's some of the consideration. And I also share that with an awareness that many of these next joints in previously thinking of recipients for these awards, at least the historic legacy awards, many of these next selections are often native, and that may be attributable to the fact that native people, not just on the Western Hemisphere, but around the earth, native people have less of a legacy and a reputation for imposing upon others, and so that actually lends itself to certain elements and disciplines of righteousness. And it's not necessarily a matter of intentionality; it's simply a matter of, or it's often a matter of just the the nature of the culture, and additionally. So, um, one example of this is the next principle, which is Makkah. I think that is principle numero seis. Um, Hello? Hello? All right. I've been sleep talking through this joint as well. If you can catch me, I'm like dozing off, and I got something else to do as well. So I got to wrap this up. It's over an hour already. Hi, y'all. It's supposed to be over less than half an hour. So, anyways, Maka is a principle that means environmentalism. Green is the land. Um, so again, I am bestowing this award on Native brethren, just because if we looked at industry, post-industrial society, agrarian society, particularly imperialistic agrarian society, not very harmonious with the environment within Amaka. So that goes to Native brethren. The next principle is Hoga. Now this one is difficult. Hoga emerges the term, the principle, the practice emerges from Scandinavia, but we can look at a lot of different cultures that emphasize the importance of coziness, about comfort, about reconciliation within the home, within the principle of family, family relationship. Um, we can go to African heritage, we can go to Arab, Muslim, we can go to Israeli, we can go to Asian, Desi, East Asia, Latino, Native. We can go to all different types of backgrounds and talk about how each one family is so important, and which community, which group from each community or organization from each community exemplifies that. It's difficult to say. So I don't. And then I continue on. Um, and again, the point is not to say the most or the best or anything on any of these. It's just a matter of building the conversation, which is one reason why doing it on a yearly basis is helps to kind of like focus the conversation, and guide the agenda and the discussion towards something that's increasingly practical and productive. So next principle, and I think Maka was siete. Did I say that? Shu, Maka, Huga. Huga is siete. Ocho is samadhi. So samadhi is concentration. Ha 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 ha. I'm going to share this one with the Buddha Sangha. When you look at the practice of the monks, even amidst all the interaction with the Sangha and everything else that the Sangha is doing, monks provide a very strong example of all the different types of ways of practicing, cultivating, strengthening, furthering samadhi. So I bestow the award upon Buddha Sangha. Next one, yes, is Shema, to hear, signifying the oneness of God, the oneness of the universe. Which community best exemplifies that? Well, this emerges from Israeli tradition, where the Shema is one of the main prayers within Israeli tradition, calling upon the children of Israel to recognize the oneness of God. Literally, that's what the prayer is, done throughout the day repeatedly, and particularly during services and liturgy. So thorough part of foundational part of Israeli tradition. So how could it be anything other than Israeli tradition? Well, in the scope of Melange, that is applicable. That is the foundation of the understanding of the principle. But it also includes a oneness that we all experience in that oneness of God, the togetherness, the belonging, the unity of the universe. And so I'm giving an honorable mention, if other than the exemplification, to Baha'i brethren. So there it is. Numero, actually that was nueve. This is diez. Numbers are around there. Approximations. Numero diez is Shobono. Brother's going to work it out. This means consensus building. It comes from Yanomami tradition of the southwest quad of this sphere, of this globe of Earth, the big river on the western hemisphere. And again, it signifies consensus building. Shibono is the communal hut that the Yanomami people live in, where people live, where people cook and eat and sleep and make decisions together as a community. And so what community is exemplifying that principle, that's experience, that discipline of Shibono? So many. We can say Yanomami. We can say other native communities, native brethren. We can say the Haudenosaunee. Um, we could say, we do say, all right. So, anyways, but we may say another day. Hey, hey. Continue on. Principle numero 11. It is Narap. So, Narap comes from, we're in Jerry tradition, and it means territory, land, effectively stewardship. Um, and so the street term we utilize to describe this is respect. Um, but in considering what group best exemplifies this principle, the Legacy Award, um, we can say Native Brethren, and additionally, but again, I'm going to leave it up there. Now, that's a wrap for that. What I'm going to say as we wrap that up is that again, this is a combo starter. This isn't the absolute. Oh, this is the religion that does this. I ain't saying all that. What I'm saying is like this is a religion that exemplifies that. And I'm saying even if I did say, I ain't saying this is the best one. This is the one that the most does this and the other. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying this is one that exemplifies it. And it's not the only one that exemplifies it, but it's the one I mentioned at this moment. And the purpose of this is building conversation. And people can debate all people like, but what's better than debate is discussion. And we can disagree. We can share points to and fro, positive and affirmational and contesting. Uh, the point is, in a righteous, benevolent, uh, virtuous way, uh, understanding what the principles are, and identifying where those principles, how those principles are practiced, and celebrating that, honoring that, respecting that. Um, that's the purpose of this exercise and this discourse at the moment. Um, and again, when speaking of it in a legacy context about like from time immemorial to this moment, that's very that lends oneself towards the competition between different communities. But when we look at what's been done in the past year, then we can be increasingly specific, um, and constructive, productive in the conversation. And so, yeah, there may be an organization to highlight, or a community to highlight, or a village to highlight that they something that they've done in the past year, or something they've done for the past few years or past few generations. There can also be multiple recipients of their I keep saying reward, the award. Um, so that's for consideration. And that's it for this joint. Oh, no joint mañana because it's Upa Saturday. Uh, so ain't doing a joint mañana. So ain't no live stream. Ain't no live stream. Ha 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 ha. Namaste, assalamu alaikum, shalom, zaijian, adios, te chakaris, sempina asa murgo, kele ofred, one love and peace.